Morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm going to talk a bit about money, a bit about the economics as well behind that. But I think it's just important to remember that whilst money is very, very important in everybody's life really here, it cannot buy you a penis. I'm just thinking about what's brought me to Bristol. It's an amazing place, and I think TED's perfect for it because of that creative side of Bristol, that innovative side of Bristol, that willingness of people to just get up and do their own thing and try stuff. That's why I think we really wanted to come to Bristol first with the plan to do the Bristol Pound. So it's a collaboration between quite a few different organisations. There's a New Economics Foundation, Transition Network. Together we're trying to support communities to do a range of different sustainability activities, but backed by thinking about how the use of local currencies can help make that happen. I'd like first, though, to talk a little bit more about my sort of motivation for it, because when I arrived in Bristol about 10 years ago, it's quite funny. I have like a small version of the speaker who we just saw there, and I'd sort of run various different businesses, and I sort of got a bit disillusioned with that, etc., property and mobile phone, blah, blah, blah. And I arrived in Bristol about 10 years ago, and I just noticed that it felt very different. And I thought, for the first time, living in lots of different places, I'd come to a place where that sense of what was important to people actually felt a bit different. There was that kind of diversity and of ways of living and things that were important to people that just felt really important. Not just the sustainability stuff, which I very quickly became involved in, but a whole sense of, if you want to have a go at something, try something, start your own business, then Bristol's a really good place to come and do that. It feels like a city full of possibilities. I mean, it suffers from lots of problems, of course, and it's not perfect. My old housemate sort of hates parts of Bristol. He calls it a nest of hippies. But it is a very diverse place. It's got that amazing energy, which I find quite inspiring. You see people starting and trying their own thing all the time. And I think that that's one of the most important things that feel like a good place to be. If you feel as an individual like you can have a go, you've got an idea, you've got a passion, and you can actually give it a go. And if you fail, maybe that doesn't matter so much. It's actually having a go. That feels like really central to the culture of Bristol for me. People want to try stuff, new stuff, just their own thing, whatever it is, and they're willing to do that. And you look around Bristol and you see this diversity of businesses, of trades, of independent, locally owned businesses, and it gives Bristol a feel that you don't see in many other places. A lot of this country, as we know, if you've heard of the term clone town Britain, whilst we have big chains, etc., and we have all the transnationals and the national companies, etc., here in Bristol, we still have, unlike many other places, a thriving independent sector, and it's critical to the quality of life of this city, I would argue, not just because of the direct services and things that they provide, but the sense that it gives people who live in this city that if I wanted to do something, I could. If I wanted to try my own thing, start my own business, this is something I could do. In particular, that relates to the sustainability agenda, because so much of what large companies do are it's very difficult to get a handle on if you're ever using a large company, whether you're a customer or a business to business. It's very difficult to know on the sustainability of things if they're way beyond our borders. So not only does that sort of sense of having independent businesses owned and run in and around Bristol as being an important part of that economy, but it's also an important part of understanding whether we can live sustainably in the future, because it's transparent to people if things are sustainable, if it's run by people you know. In your community, in your city, in your neighbourhood. So what's the role of money, and why is it so important in terms of supporting people supporting a city like Bristol to have that diversity of people, of traders doing their own thing, providing high quality work, etc. Well, I think it's important to understand. Shall I turn that off maybe if I keep pacing up and down? I think it's important to understand what money is, really, to understand how crucial it is that we understand the principles behind the way money operates if we want to know why we might want to do something different on a local basis. I don't know if anybody knows what these are. They're quite famous in Bristol, but they're actually pieces of 8. It's Spanish coins, well, actually South American silver. It began the global economy with these coins were central for starting the globalization of trade around the world 500 years ago. So in some ways you could say it's that technology which kicked off a step change in the way people interact with each other. I mean, money, you can look at it as notes and coins and other iterations of it like that, or you can see it as a cultural phenomenon. It effectively allows complexity to grow, to constantly change the levels and the depth of complexity in society. You can't have a complex society really without a money system where people trust the means of exchange. And the pieces of 8 were one of the first things that came along that everybody trusted. Wherever you were trading, in Australia, Europe, America, everybody trusted these things. People thought they were worth something. In other sort of iterations of money, in this country we had for about 300 years, the economy of this country was built on tally sticks. People trusted each other just on bits of notched stick that they would hand to each other. The reason that they trusted that was because the government accepted them as tax. So effectively there was a free money system for 300 years in this country. It's a very poorly known story. This is a Turner painting from 1835, and it's a painting of a fire when the Houses of Parliament burnt down. And the story behind this is fascinating for me. The free money that was out there in the economy, these tally sticks, they were notched paired sticks. One half was kept by the Exchequer near the Houses of Parliament, and others would circulate around the economy. And everybody trusted them as a currency because they knew ultimately if they had one and they couldn't use it to exchange for anything else, at least they could pay their taxes in it. So that's a critical part of building the trust in a currency, is that it has a backstop that everybody recognises. But of course the bankers of the time didn't like tally sticks because they couldn't really make any money out of that. So eventually they bought up all the tally sticks out of the economy. They were moving to a written sort of accounting system anyway. And they bought in all the tally sticks and they wanted to get rid of them as quickly as they possibly could. And in a way which you imagine this pile of sticks, I don't know, sort of 100 feet high. It's basically money, pile of money. And they decide they've just got to burn the whole lot so they can start a new banking system with which they can more effectively charge interest, etc. And they wanted to get rid of it as quietly and as quickly as they could. So in rather a rush, they were burning it in the ovens in the Houses of Parliament, underneath the Houses of Parliament. And they tried to do it a bit too quickly. And so eventually the ovens overheated, the copper lining collapsed, and the whole of the Houses of Parliament, both the House of Lords and the House of Commons, were burnt to the ground. And I just think it's a fantastic metaphor for today. You know, the bankers are desperate to implement a system that worked better for them and made them more money, sort of destroyed the sort of the House of representative democracy of the time. And we're not in such a dissimilar situation today. Of course, we don't have tally sticks now. We don't even have really notes and coins anymore. They're out there, but actually that's not what money is these days. Most money today is created as debt. Something like 97% of money transaction by worth has got nothing to do with notes and coins anymore. It's all to do with electronic deposits created by private banks as debt in people's accounts. Things like mortgages. They're just made up out of thin air, pretty much. it's weird, and but effectively we have this debt-based economic system with the money that works, and that means we have to have a growth-based economy and all the things that brings with it in terms of sustainability. Endless growth because you have to service debt, and you always need to have a bigger economy to service bigger and bigger debt. And the only way of managing that debt is to have a bigger and bigger economy. So your revenues are bigger relative to the size of the cost of the debt. So this is a big subject. I'm going to try to go into it in too much detail. But effectively, we have this banking system which is dependent on interest, and therefore all our economies globally are now dependent on growth. That's the real reason we need growth, so we can manage our debt. But also, the other critical thing about the money system we have now, the banking system we have now, is that a huge portion of it is offshore. So in a place like Bristol, the wealth that's created in an area like this by all the different businesses that ordinary people sort of running their own businesses, and that's the majority of the economy, and that's how most people are employed. Essentially, we all normally pay taxes, etc., etc. But of course, the banking system, much of that is offshore. Something like between 10 and 20 trillion dollars worth of global wealth is held offshore. Nobody really knows. That's the whole point of it being offshore, so nobody really knows. But a huge portion of it is out there, and about something like 50% of global trade at the moment goes through the offshore sector. That is incredible. That means all that wealth is lost to local economies in places like Bristol. That's a big problem for trying to maintain. If people, through their work, the work that they're doing, they're generating wealth. Every hour you put in can generate an equivalent amount of wealth in the local economy. But of course, a lot of big companies using the big banks, they take that wealth out of areas through the offshore system, sometimes obviously to pay their costs, etc., pay suppliers, yes, of course, but a lot of it goes out through and out of areas and out offshore, whether it's in London and quasi-offshore or genuinely offshore. And just to say that again, 50% of global trade approximately goes through the offshore banking sector. Okay? So not only is global trade have lots of problems with trying to work out whether it's ever sustainable, whoever knows, with these huge long supply chains dependent on oil we can't really afford anymore, etc., and all those sustainability issues. But in terms of maintaining wealth in an area from people's work when they're starting their relatively small to medium-sized businesses, actually a lot of the money is being sucked out of the area. As soon as that money goes into a large bank or a national, through a transnational company, etc., you lose money from the area. And that's on a massive scale. And I've just referred to, this is a great quote I really like from Lord Acton, who's most famous for talking about how power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But this is my favourite quote from him. And the issue which has swept down the centuries and which will have to be fought sooner or later is the people versus the banks. So this sucking of wealth out of economies, out of individuals' lives and into the national banking, international banking system is something that affects us all, locally, personally, etc. But this other quote I put here from Galbraith, who advised many American presidents, is, I think, really important to remember as well. And this is a thing that thought, well, if this is true, then maybe there's something we can do about it. The process by which banks create money is so simple that the mind is repelled. Well, if it's that simple, maybe instead of being repelled, I'll have a look and see if there's something we can do about it. Lots of projects have been springing up through the transition network, up and down the country. Other groups, groups of artists in places like Denmark, and apparently there's a currency. One of the speakers who's from Milwaukee today was saying that they have just started their own currency in Milwaukee. Most of these systems are really successful in a way because they bring a lot of attention to the area. They build the brand of an area, and in a place like Bristol would benefit, I would imagine, enormously from having its own currency, just from the kind of the buzz it gives people, the celebration of the culture through the use of notes, etc., and all the artwork that would go with that. But is there something more serious we can do to support local economies thrive and really capture wealth in the area from the hard work that people do. Because in Bristol, there's obviously a strong sentiment in certain quarters that we want to maintain that diversity, that unique quality that is Bristol. And I don't know if most people may have heard of the campaign against Tesco for the reason that people in this case Stokes Craft around Montpellier, that they wanted to maintain their own sort of identity and didn't want large brands coming in and sort of changing the feel of the area. So there was a big campaign to stop the Tesco. But I think a lot of us, and me included to some degree, and I'm really sympathetic to the campaign, I live around there as well, but we really wanted something to say yes to, actually. And I think that's true for a lot of people. So what is it that we can do to support that independent diversity rather than just campaigning against things that we don't feel comfortable with? So what we've done is we've created over the last couple of years, looking at all the independent currency models that are out there, we've created this open source system, which is a trading platform. So any initiative or any town or group or community who wants to start building their own currency system can do so. Because now, the reason why it's revolutionary is because we really do have the technology. The social media, the internet, of course, all these things make it very, very possible for us to run our own money system. So we've spent the last 2 years looking at how that would work, looking and learning from the people out there. We've got, so Totnes have got their own pound, and that's brought enormous branding to the town, but they only have notes. And as I was saying before, 97% of the economy is done electronically. So although it brings huge benefit to the town in terms of focus on local trade, the amount of notes that are actually used is relatively small. And the same is the case in other places like Brixton. They've really benefited from, in Brixton, having their own pound. There's a Brixton pound, believe it or not. And that, they've estimated over £100,000 worth just in the first few months of advertising was brought just from launching their own pound. So it just really, it's a very cheap and effective way for business communities, for the independent sector to galvanise and really put their, got 2 minutes left. 30 seconds, oh God. So we've created this platform now that anybody can use it. So instead of these communities just having the ability to do things with notes, they can actually do things at a much bigger scale. So Bristol, with the consortium of people who've got together to build this, could be the first city to really benefit. I'm not going to take you through this. This is a thing demonstrating a thing called a local multiplier and how if you have your own money system, it captures wealth in the system. I'm clearly not going to have time to go through that or that. So when is it going to happen? In Bristol, there's already something in Brixton just about to launch its new notes. Edinburgh are trying to get there. Hopefully they won't get there before us. But there's a PR launch for Bristol's new money system, and that's on the 17th of October. I'm sorry I can't tell you a bit more about the detail of it. I've run out of time anyway. But 17th of October, all the detail about how it's going to work and who's going to be involved. So heads up, look out for it. You'll be seeing this sign all across the city. Thanks very much.